I remember the exact moment everything broke. It started with something small, a dinner reservation. I had been smiling the entire drive to the restaurant. Daniel loved surprises, or at least he used to. 6 years of marriage teaches you the little things about someone. His favorite wine, the way he loosened his tie when he was tired, the quiet smile he gave me whenever I walked into a room. So I decided to surprise him that night. No calls, no warning, just me walking into his favorite luxury restaurant. I stepped through the glass doors, and the scent of expensive perfume and grilled steak filled the air. The lighting was low. Soft music floated through the room. Everything looked romantic. Perfect. Then I saw him, Daniel Carter, my husband, my billionaire husband. He was already sitting at a table near the window. But he wasn't alone. Across from him sat a woman I had never seen before. Beautiful, young. Her hair fell perfectly over her shoulders. She leaned forward slightly as she laughed. Daniel reached across the table and held her hand. My feet stopped moving. I felt like the floor had disappeared under me. I stood there frozen while the waiter walked past me. My heart started pounding in my ears. Then I heard him speak. "Once the divorce is done, we can finally be together." The words sliced straight through me. Divorce. I felt my stomach twist. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to that table and throw the wine in his face. But instead, I quietly pulled out my phone. My fingers were shaking. I took one photo, Daniel holding her hand, both of them smiling. Evidence. Then I turned around and walked out of the restaurant. I didn't cry, because in that moment, something inside me changed. If Daniel wanted freedom, I would give it to him, but on my terms. Emma Carter walked out of the restaurant slowly. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. Every step felt heavier than the last. Outside, the cold night air hit her face. For a moment, she just stood there. Traffic moved along the street. People laughed as they walked past. The world continued as if nothing had happened. Inside the restaurant, her marriage had just shattered. But outside, no one knew. Emma unlocked her car and sat in the driver's seat. Her hands rested on the steering wheel. She stared straight ahead. Her mind replayed the moment again and again. Daniel's hand holding the other woman's. His voice. Once the divorce is done, divorce. He had already planned it, and he hadn't even told her. A sharp breath escaped her lips. "I helped build everything you have," she whispered to herself. "When I was there before the first million, before the fame, before the empire." Emma leaned back in the seat. For the first time that night, her eyes began to burn, but she refused to cry. Not for him. Instead, she opened her phone again. The photo stared back at her. Clear. Undeniable. Proof. Emma zoomed in on Daniel's face. He looked happy. That hurt more than anything. She locked the phone and started the car. The engine hummed quietly. Her voice was calm now, almost cold. "All right, Daniel," she murmured. "You want a divorce? Let's do it." But what Daniel didn't know, Emma had no intention of walking away quietly. The Carter mansion sat on a hill overlooking the city. Glass walls, white stone, a house built with success. Emma walked through the front door just after midnight. The house was silent. Daniel wasn't home yet. Of course he wasn't. He was still finishing dinner with his mistress. Emma set her purse on the kitchen counter. For a moment she simply stood there. 6 years of memories filled the space. Birthday parties, late-night conversations, dreams about the future. Now the house felt different. Empty. She walked upstairs and entered Daniel's office. The room smelled faintly of his cologne. Awards lined the walls. Business magazines featured his face. Visionary CEO. Billionaire innovator. Emma stared at one framed article. The headline read, "The couple behind the empire." Her lips pressed together. That article should have said the truth, she muttered. The woman behind the empire. Because Emma had been there from the beginning, before investors, before board meetings, before success. She helped Daniel build the company strategy. She helped him secure his first funding. But the world only saw him. Emma opened a desk drawer slowly. Inside were company documents, contracts, financial reports. Her mind started turning. Daniel thought she was just his wife, supportive, loyal. But Emma knew the business inside out, and suddenly a quiet realization settled in. If Daniel wanted to end their marriage, he might be ending far more than that. Emma closed the drawer. A faint smile appeared on her face. Careful what you wish for, Daniel. Daniel arrived home around 2 a.m. Emma heard the front door open downstairs. His footsteps echoed through the hallway. She remained sitting on the edge of the bed, waiting. Daniel walked into the bedroom while loosening his tie. He froze when he saw her awake. "You're still up?" he asked casually. Emma studied his face carefully. There was no guilt, no nervousness, just the calm confidence he always carried. "I couldn't sleep," Emma replied. Daniel nodded and walked toward the closet. "How was your evening?" she asked. Daniel shrugged. "Just a late business dinner." Emma felt the lie settle between them. Heavy, ugly, but she didn't react. Not yet. Instead, she simply nodded. "That's good," she said quietly. Daniel disappeared into the bathroom. The shower started running. Emma stared at the wall. Her thoughts were sharp now, focused. He was lying to her face. After everything. For a moment, anger flashed inside her chest. Then it faded. Cold clarity replaced it. Emma whispered softly, "You have no idea what you just started." The shower continued running. Daniel believed everything was under control. He believed Emma knew nothing. That assumption would become his biggest mistake. The next morning, the house felt strangely normal. Sunlight filled the kitchen. Coffee brewed quietly. Emma stood at the counter scrolling through her phone. Daniel walked in wearing a tailored suit. He kissed her lightly on the cheek. "Morning," he said. Emma forced a small smile. "Morning." Daniel poured himself coffee. "I have meetings all day," he said. Emma nodded. "Of course you do." Daniel grabbed his briefcase. He didn't notice the way Emma watched him, carefully, analyzing every movement, every word. He finished his coffee and headed for the door. "I'll be home late," he added. Emma almost laughed. Of course he would. Another dinner with Vanessa. Another lie. "Drive safe," Emma said calmly. Daniel left the house without another thought. The moment the door closed, Emma's expression changed. When the smile vanished, her eyes turned sharp. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. A receptionist answered. "Good morning, Lawson and Wright Law Firm." Emma spoke clearly. "I'd like to schedule a consultation with your best divorce attorney." There was a brief pause. "Of course, ma'am." Emma ended the call. The game had officially begun. 2 days later, Emma sat inside a quiet law office downtown. The walls were lined with legal books. Across the desk sat Michael Lawson, one of the most respected divorce attorneys in the city. He reviewed the photo Emma had taken, Daniel holding the other woman's hand. Michael leaned back slowly. "Clear evidence of adultery," he said. Emma folded her hands calmly. "I thought so." Michael studied her carefully. "Are you sure you want to move forward?" Emma didn't hesitate. "Yes," Michael nodded. "Then we need to review your marriage contract." Emma frowned slightly. "Our prenup?" "Yes," Michael said. "Every detail matters in a divorce involving this much wealth." Emma handed him the document Daniel had insisted they update 3 years earlier. Michael began reading. His eyes moved slowly across the pages. Minutes passed. Emma watched his expression carefully. Then something unexpected happened. Michael smiled, a slow, surprised smile. "Well," he said quietly, "this just got very interesting." Emma leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean?" Michael tapped the page. "Your husband made a serious mistake." Emma felt curiosity rise inside her. For a man trying to protect his wealth, Michael looked up. He created the perfect trap for himself. Emma leaned forward in her chair. Her heart beat a little faster. "What kind of mistake?" she asked. Michael turned the document toward her. 3 years ago, your husband updated this contract." Emma nodded slowly. "I remember." Michael tapped a specific clause. "Did you read this section carefully?" Emma scanned the page. Legal language filled the paragraph. "I trusted him," she admitted. Michael gave a knowing look. "Well, you might be glad you did." Emma frowned. "Why?" Michael folded his hands. "This clause states that if Daniel Carter commits proven adultery," he paused for emphasis, "the division of marital assets changes." Emma felt a strange tension build in her chest. "What kind of change?" Michael spoke calmly. You receive 50% ownership of Carter Global. Emma blinked. Yeah, for a moment she thought she misheard. Half the company? Michael nodded. Exactly half. Emma's breath slowed. Daniel had built $1 billion empire, and now half of it could legally become hers. Michael leaned forward slightly. With the evidence you provided, he tapped the phone photo again. This case is very strong. Emma leaned back slowly. A quiet realization settled in. Daniel thought he was the one preparing for divorce, but in reality, he had just handed Emma half his empire. Her voice was almost a whisper. You really should read the fine print. Emma stepped out of the law firm into the afternoon sunlight. The city buzzed with energy around her. Cars passed. People rushed down sidewalks. Everything felt strangely different. Her life had just changed direction. She walked slowly toward her car. Half the company, half of Daniel's empire. He had never expected that. Emma opened her phone again. The photo from the restaurant still sat in her gallery. Daniel and the woman, Vanessa. Emma zoomed in on the woman's face. Beautiful, confident, dangerous. Emma whispered quietly, "So you're the one." She searched the woman's name online. It didn't take long. Vanessa Blake, model, socialite, famous for dating wealthy men. Emma scrolled through photos of Vanessa at luxury parties. Yachts, designer stores, famous resorts. Emma's eyes narrowed slightly. Vanessa didn't just date rich men, she targeted them, and Daniel had walked straight into her trap. Emma locked the phone, but instead of anger, she felt something else. Opportunity. That evening, Emma sat alone in the living room. The Carter mansion was quiet again, but the silence no longer felt painful. It felt strategic. She opened a notebook on the table and began writing. Daniel Carter, Vanessa Blake, divorce timeline, company shares, legal strategy. Every detail mattered. Emma wasn't acting on emotion anymore. This was planning, precise, controlled. For 6 years, she had supported Daniel's empire. Now she would dismantle the parts that betrayed her. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Daniel had returned home again. Emma closed the notebook before he entered the room. He smiled casually. "Long day," he said. Emma looked up at him, her expression calm, almost warm. "I can imagine." Daniel walked past her without noticing anything unusual. He had no idea the woman sitting in that room had already begun rewriting his future. Emma watched him disappear upstairs. Then she whispered quietly to herself, "You wanted a divorce. You're about to get one." Emma woke before sunrise the next morning. The mansion was silent. Daniel had already left for an early meeting, or at least that was the excuse he gave. Emma sat at the dining table with a cup of coffee and her laptop open. The screen displayed Vanessa Blake's public profile. Hundreds of glamorous photos, red carpets, private yachts, luxury hotels. Vanessa smiled in every image, as if the world belonged to her. Emma studied each one carefully. This wasn't jealousy. This was research. She opened a new document and began writing notes. Vanessa Blake, age 31, former model, frequent appearances at elite charity galas, 3 previous marriages, 3 divorces, 3 wealthy husbands. Emma leaned back slowly. "That's not coincidence," she murmured. Each marriage ended with a large settlement, or each husband lost millions. Vanessa gained a reputation, a beautiful woman who always walked away richer. Emma's fingers tapped the keyboard again. "So you're a professional," she whispered. But something else caught her attention. Vanessa had started appearing around Daniel only 8 months ago. Around the same time, Daniel began staying late at the office. Around the same time, he suggested updating the marriage contract. Emma's eyes narrowed. The timing was too perfect. Either Daniel had been manipulated, or he had willingly stepped into the trap. Either way, Emma intended to find out the truth. Later that afternoon, Emma drove across the city. Her destination was a high-end shopping district. She had done her research carefully. Vanessa Blake had a favorite boutique, an exclusive designer store where celebrities often shopped. Emma parked across the street. She waited patiently inside the car. 40 minutes passed. Then a sleek black convertible pulled up to the curb. Emma recognized Vanessa immediately. Tall, elegant, Her confidence was unmistakable. Vanessa stepped out of the car wearing oversized sunglasses and a white dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. A store employee rushed to open the door for her. Emma watched silently. Vanessa walked into the boutique as if she owned the building. Emma stepped out of her car and crossed the street. She entered the store moments later. Vanessa stood near a display of designer handbags. The sales associate held up several options. Vanessa barely glanced at the price tags. Emma pretended to browse nearby. She listened carefully. "I'll take all three," Vanessa said casually. The employee smiled eagerly. "Of course, Ms. Blake." Emma glanced toward the counter. A credit card appeared in Vanessa's hand. Emma leaned slightly to read the name on it. Daniel Carter. Emma's lips pressed together. Vanessa wasn't just dating Daniel. She was already spending his money. Emma left the boutique before Vanessa finished shopping. She returned to her car and sat in silence. Her mind processed everything she had just seen. Vanessa was comfortable. Too comfortable. Using Daniel's credit cards. Shopping openly. That meant Daniel wasn't hiding the relationship from her. He was encouraging it. Emma opened her phone again. She pulled up the photo from the restaurant. Then she opened another file. The prenup clause. Adultery equals 50% of the company. Emma stared at both pieces of evidence. Daniel believed he was preparing to leave his wife, but Emma realized something important. Vanessa probably didn't know about the clause. Vanessa believed she was securing a billionaire, not splitting one in half. Emma leaned back and exhaled slowly. "So neither of you actually understand the situation," she murmured. That made everything easier, because when two people believe they're winning, they never see the trap closing around them. Emma started the engine. The next move would require patience and precision. 3 nights later, Daniel arrived home unusually early. Emma was in the kitchen preparing dinner. He loosened his tie and walked toward the counter. "Smells good," he said casually. Emma glanced at him. "You're home earlier than usual." Daniel shrugged. "Board meeting was canceled." Emma nodded while stirring the pan. Silence filled the kitchen for a moment. Then Daniel spoke again. "I might be traveling next week." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Business?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Yes." Emma almost smiled. Another lie. She placed 2 plates on the table. They sat down across from each other. For years, dinner had been their quiet moment together. Now it felt like a negotiation between strangers. Daniel checked his phone several times during the meal. Emma noticed the name that flashed across the screen. Vanessa. Daniel quickly flipped the phone over. Emma continued eating calmly. Inside her mind, she repeated a quiet thought. "You really think I don't see it?" Daniel finally looked up. "Everything okay?" he asked. Emma wiped her hands gently. "Of course," she said, but her voice carried a calm certainty, the kind that comes from knowing the truth. The next morning, Emma returned to Michael Lawson's office. She placed a folder on his desk. Michael opened it carefully. Inside were photos, receipts, screenshots, evidence from Vanessa's shopping spree. Michael adjusted his glasses. "Well," he said slowly, "your husband isn't being subtle." Emma crossed her arms. "I didn't expect him to be." Michael reviewed the credit card statements. "These purchases are all connected to Daniel's accounts." Emma nodded. "Vanessa has access to them." Michael leaned back thoughtfully. "This strengthens your case even further." Emma watched him closely. "What happens next?" Michael spoke calmly. "First, we prepare the official divorce filing." Emma felt the words settle into reality. "Divorce? 6 years ending on legal paper," Michael continued. "Then we present the adultery evidence." Emma looked out the window for a moment. Cars moved slowly through downtown traffic. Life continued, even when marriages collapsed. She turned back to the lawyer. "How long before Daniel realizes what's happening?" Michael smiled slightly. "Probably the moment he receives the paperwork." Emma's expression remained calm. Good. She wanted him to be surprised. 2 days later, Daniel arrived at his corporate headquarters. Carter Global towered above the city skyline, a monument to his success. He stepped into the executive elevator with confidence. Employees greeted him respectfully. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." Daniel nodded politely, but his day changed the moment he reached his office. His assistant stood waiting with a nervous expression. "Mr. Carter, someone delivered these for you." She handed him a sealed envelope. Daniel frowned. "What is it?" "Legal documents," she replied quietly. Daniel opened the envelope. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second, then the third. His expression hardened. Divorce filing. Emma Carter versus Daniel Carter. Daniel's jaw tightened. He flipped through the pages quickly. Then he saw the clause. Adultery confirmed. An asset division triggered. 50% ownership transfer. Daniel slammed the papers on his desk. "That's impossible," he muttered. His assistant stepped back nervously. But the documents were clear. Emma wasn't just asking for a divorce. She was claiming half the company. Daniel grabbed his phone immediately. He dialed Emma. The call rang once, twice. Then she answered calmly. "Yes, Daniel." His voice was sharp. "What the hell is this?" Emma's tone remained steady. "You asked for a divorce, so I'm giving you one." Daniel drove home faster than he had in years. Anger burned through his chest. He stormed through the front door of the mansion. "Emma!" She was sitting in the living room, reading quietly. She looked up as if nothing was unusual. "You're home early," she said calmly. Daniel threw the documents onto the table. "What is this nonsense?" Emma glanced at the papers. "Divorce paperwork." Daniel's voice rose. "You think you can take half my company?" Emma closed the book slowly. "You mean the clause you added yourself?" Daniel froze. Emma stood up and walked toward him. "You updated the contract 3 years ago," she continued. "You should have read it more carefully." Daniel's face turned pale. Emma looked him directly in the eyes. "And next time you cheat on your wife?" She paused. "Carter, don't do it in public." Daniel stared at her. Realization finally hit him. Emma knew everything. Every lie, every secret, every betrayal. And somehow, she had already turned it against him. That evening, Daniel called Vanessa. She answered immediately. "Hey, Daniel." His voice was tight with anger. "We need to talk." Vanessa laughed lightly. "About what?" Daniel paced his office. "My wife filed for divorce." There was a pause. Vanessa sounded pleased. "Well, that's good news, right?" Daniel rubbed his forehead. "No. She's taking half the company." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. Vanessa's tone changed instantly. "What do you mean half?" Daniel's voice was low. "A clause in the prenup." Vanessa exhaled sharply. "That wasn't part of the plan." Daniel stopped pacing. "What plan?" Another pause. Then Vanessa quickly corrected herself. "I mean, that's not what I expected." But Daniel had heard the words clearly. Plan. Suddenly doubt crept into his mind. For the first time, he wondered if he had misjudged more than just Emma. Late that night, Emma stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Wind moved gently through her hair. Lights stretched across the skyline. Inside the house, Daniel was still shouting on phone calls. Lawyers, advisors, damage control. Emma remained calm. She placed both hands on the railing. For years, she had lived quietly beside Daniel's success. Now everything had changed. The battle had officially begun, and Daniel finally understood the truth. Emma Carter was no longer the supportive wife standing in the background. She was the woman about to take half his empire. Emma whispered quietly into the night, "You wanted freedom. Now let's see what it costs." The news spread through Carter Global faster than Daniel expected. Executives whispered in hallways. Assistants exchanged worried looks. Investors began making quiet phone calls. Daniel sat inside the boardroom staring at the long glass table. For years, he had ruled this company without challenge. Now everything felt unstable. Across the table sat several board members. Their expressions were serious. One of them cleared his throat. "Daniel, we need to discuss the divorce situation." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "It's a private matter." Another board member shook his head slowly. "Not when it affects company ownership." The legal document lay in the center of the table. Half the company potentially transferring to Emma Carter. That meant voting power, board influence, leadership decisions. Daniel clenched his jaw. "Hey, she won't win," he said firmly. But even as he spoke the words, he wasn't completely certain, because Emma knew the company almost as well as he did. Some board members had worked with her in the early years. They respected her, trusted her. One older executive finally spoke. Emma helped build this company, Daniel. Silence filled the room. Daniel felt something unfamiliar rising in his chest. Pressure. For the first time in years, his control was slipping. Emma sat in Michael Lawson's office again. This time, the mood was calmer. Michael handed her a folder. Daniel has officially responded to the filing. Emma opened the document. Predictable arguments filled the pages. Claims, denials, legal resistance. She closed the folder. He's fighting, Michael nodded. He's trying to challenge the clause. Emma almost smiled. That clause was written by his own lawyers. Michael leaned back. Exactly. Emma stared out the window briefly. She remembered the early days of Carter Global. Small office, long nights, endless strategy meetings. Back then, Daniel trusted her judgment. Back then, they were partners. Now he treated her like an enemy. Emma looked back at Michael. What happens when the evidence is presented? Michael spoke confidently. Then the contract activates. Emma exhaled slowly. And Daniel loses half his company. Michael nodded once. Correct. Emma's voice lowered. He should have been more careful. But Emma knew something Daniel didn't. This wasn't only about the divorce anymore. This was about control, and the fight was just beginning. Across the city, Vanessa Blake sat inside a luxury spa lounge. Soft music played around her. A stylist carefully adjusted her hair. Vanessa studied her reflection in the mirror. Her phone rested on the marble counter. Daniel's message still glowed on the screen. We need to talk. Vanessa sighed slightly. The situation had become complicated. She hadn't expected Emma to react so quickly, and she definitely hadn't expected the prenup clause. Still, Vanessa wasn't worried yet. She had survived worse situations. She opened a social media post showing a yacht party from last month. Daniel stood beside her smiling. Wealth, influence, power. Vanessa had spent years learning how to navigate men like him. But something about Emma bothered her. Most wives begged, cried, panicked. Emma had done the opposite. She moved quietly. Whereas strategically, Vanessa picked up her phone and dialed Daniel. He answered immediately. Where are you? He asked. Vanessa's tone stayed calm. Relax, Daniel. But inside her mind, she was already adjusting the plan. Emma visited Carter Global headquarters for the first time in months. Employees noticed immediately. Conversations stopped as she walked through the lobby. Some people looked surprised. Others looked relieved. Emma moved confidently toward the elevator. The building still felt familiar. She had spent years working here, helping design the early structure of the company. Inside the elevator, she saw two junior employees whispering nervously. They quickly fell silent. Emma simply smiled politely. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor. Daniel's assistant looked stunned. Mrs. Carter, Emma nodded. Good morning. The assistant hesitated. Mr. Carter's in a meeting. Emma walked past her. That's fine. Several executives noticed her arrival. Some nodded respectfully. Emma stepped into an empty conference room and waited. Because this building wasn't just Daniel's workplace, it was hers too. And soon, everyone inside would remember that. Daniel's meeting ended abruptly when he heard Emma had arrived. He pushed open the conference room door. Emma stood near the window. The skyline stretched behind her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Daniel closed the door. You shouldn't be here. Emma turned slowly. I helped build this company. Daniel's voice hardened. You're trying to take it. Emma shook her head. No, you gave it to me. Daniel stepped closer. This isn't over. Emma's expression remained calm. I know. Daniel studied her carefully. You planned this. Emma met his gaze without hesitation. You cheated. Silence filled the room. Daniel finally spoke again. You're destroying everything. Emma's voice stayed steady. No, Daniel. You already did that the night you chose her. The truth hung between them, cold, unavoidable. Later that afternoon, Emma met with two senior board members. They sat in a quiet restaurant lounge. One of them spoke first. Emma, we wanted to understand your intentions. Emma placed her glass on the table. My intentions? The second board member nodded. If the contract transfers ownership, you will control half the company. Emma studied them carefully. For years, I helped build Carter Global. They both nodded. We know. Emma leaned forward slightly. I'm not interested in destroying the company. That statement seemed to relax them. But, Emma continued calmly, I will not allow it to collapse because of Daniel's mistakes. One board member asked quietly. If the board must choose leadership, what would you do? Emma answered without hesitation. I would protect the company. The two men exchanged a glance. And in that moment, something shifted. Emma wasn't just the betrayed wife anymore. She was becoming a serious contender for power. That night, Daniel met Vanessa at a private penthouse. The city lights glowed through the windows. Vanessa poured herself a drink. Daniel looked exhausted. You told me this would be simple, he said. Vanessa leaned against the counter. It should have been. Daniel shook his head. She's taking half the company. Vanessa frowned. You'll fight it. Daniel's voice grew sharper. The clause is airtight. Vanessa studied him carefully. You're a billionaire, Daniel. Hire better lawyers. Daniel slammed his glass onto the table. You don't understand. If Emma takes control, the board might support her. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. That possibility hadn't crossed her mind. She had planned to marry a billionaire, not compete with one. Vanessa took a slow sip of her drink. Then we need a different strategy. Daniel looked at her. What kind of strategy? Vanessa smiled faintly. The kind that makes Emma disappear from the equation. Daniel didn't respond, but the idea lingered in the room. Emma returned home late that evening. The mansion felt different now. Daniel was no longer there. He had moved into a downtown penthouse. Emma walked through the quiet living room. Her phone buzzed. A message from Michael Lawson appeared. The court hearing is scheduled. Emma sat down and opened the file. The date was approaching quickly. Everything was moving faster now. Evidence would be presented. Contracts examined. Ownership decided. Emma closed the phone and looked around the house. 6 years of memories lived within those walls. But strangely, she didn't feel sadness anymore. She felt clarity. Her voice echoed softly in the quiet room. I gave him loyalty. I gave him partnership. And he traded it for betrayal. Emma stood and walked toward the staircase. The next chapter would begin soon. And Daniel Carter still believed he could win. That illusion wouldn't last much longer. 3 days later, the business media began reporting rumors. Corporate blogs, financial news sites, industry analysts. The headline appeared everywhere. Carter Global Divorce Battle could shift billion-dollar control. Emma watched the coverage from her office at home. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages. Some supportive, some curious, some from investors. Daniel's empire was becoming public drama. Emma knew that pressure would weaken him, but she remained calm. This was only the midpoint of the storm. Before closing her laptop, she looked at the skyline again and whispered quietly, half the empire was the beginning. Now we'll see who truly deserves it. The courtroom was already full when Emma arrived. Lawyers filled the front rows. Reporters sat quietly in the back. Everyone understood the significance of the case. Carter Global was worth billions, and today's hearing could shift control of the empire. Emma walked calmly to her seat beside Michael Lawson. Across the room, Daniel stood with his legal team. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Daniel looked exhausted. Emma looked composed. The judge entered and the room fell silent. Documents were placed on the table. Evidence organized. The hearing began. Daniel's lawyers argued first. They claimed the clause in the contract had been misunderstood. They attempted to argue technical interpretations. Emma listened without reacting. Michael remained calm beside her. Finally, the judge asked one simple question. Is there evidence of adultery connected to the clause? Michael stood slowly. Yes, Your Honor. He displayed the photo. Daniel holding Vanessa's hand at the restaurant. Clear. Undeniable. The room grew quiet. Daniel lowered his eyes, and Emma felt something inside her settle. This moment had been coming since the night she walked out of that restaurant. Daniel's lawyer attempted to recover. He stood quickly. Your Honor, a single photograph does not define the situation. The judge studied the image carefully. Michael Lawson remained calm. He placed another file on the table. Additional evidence, he said. Credit card statements appeared on the screen. Luxury purchases, travel bookings, private vacations, all linked to Vanessa Blake, all paid using Daniel Carter's accounts. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Michael continued. These expenses were made during the marriage. He turned toward Daniel, and in clear violation of the contractual clause. Daniel's lawyer objected again, but the evidence kept building. Every receipt, every hotel stay, every transaction. Emma watched quietly. The case was unfolding exactly as Michael predicted. Daniel's confidence was fading, and everyone in the room could see it. Across town, Vanessa Blake sat inside her penthouse apartment. A television displayed the breaking news coverage. The courtroom hearing was being reported live. Vanessa watched with growing irritation. The reporters described the evidence, the prenup clause, the possible transfer of company ownership. Vanessa muted the television. Her mind raced through possibilities. Daniel losing half the company complicated everything, but the situation was becoming worse. A new headline appeared on the screen. Financial investigators reviewing Carter Global internal leaks. Vanessa frowned. That part was unexpected, because she knew exactly what those leaks were. She had convinced Daniel to share private company updates months ago. Small information, market movements, strategic meetings, nothing obvious. Way but enough to benefit certain investors. Vanessa had planned to use that information later. Now, if anyone discovered the connection, her entire plan would collapse. For the first time, Vanessa felt real concern. The situation was becoming dangerous. Back inside the courtroom, the hearing continued. Michael Lawson requested permission to present one final piece of evidence. The judge nodded. Michael opened another document. Your Honor, we also discovered suspicious communication between Daniel Carter's companion and outside financial parties. Daniel looked up sharply. Michael continued speaking. These communications involve confidential company data. The courtroom filled with quiet whispers. Daniel turned toward Emma in disbelief. You're accusing her of corporate leaks? Michael spoke calmly. We are presenting evidence. Several emails appeared on the screen. Vanessa's private account, messages discussing stock movement predictions, investment timing, confidential board discussions. Daniel's face turned pale. He looked stunned. Now, Vanessa had never mentioned any of this. Emma watched silently. She had uncovered the trail weeks earlier and saved it for the right moment. The judge reviewed the documents carefully. This matter may require further investigation, the judge said. Daniel leaned back in his chair. For the first time, he realized something terrifying. Vanessa might not have been his partner. She might have been using him all along. The hearing ended several hours later. The judge announced that the contractual clause remained valid pending final review. That meant the ownership transfer process would begin. Emma stepped outside the courthouse. Cameras flashed immediately. Reporters gathered near the entrance. Mrs. Carter, do you have a statement? Emma paused briefly. Her voice remained steady. I trusted my husband for 6 years. Microphones moved closer. But trust must exist on both sides. Another reporter asked about the company. Emma answered calmly. Carter Global deserves responsible leadership. The statement spread across financial media within minutes. Inside the courthouse, Daniel watched from the window. The woman speaking to reporters looked different from the wife he once knew. Stronger, sharper, unshaken. Daniel realized too late that Emma had transformed into something he could no longer control. 2 weeks later, Carter Global's board gathered for an emergency meeting. Legal advisors confirmed the court's preliminary decision. Emma Carter now held 50% ownership. The boardroom atmosphere was tense. Daniel sat quietly at one end of the table. Emma entered the room calmly. Several board members greeted her respectfully. The chairman cleared his throat. Given the situation, we must discuss leadership stability. Everyone understood the meaning. Daniel's authority had been damaged. Investors were nervous. One board member finally spoke. We need someone the market trusts. The chairman looked toward Emma. Mrs. Carter, would you be willing to assume an executive leadership role? Daniel looked up sharply. Emma remained composed. For years, she had stood behind the scenes. Now the opportunity stood directly in front of her. I would accept the responsibility, she said. The room fell silent. The balance of power had officially changed. Meanwhile, investigators visited Vanessa's penthouse. 2 financial officers waited at the door. Vanessa opened it slowly. Can I help you? One officer displayed identification. We need to ask you questions regarding insider information connected to Carter Global. Vanessa's confidence faltered. She attempted to remain calm. I don't know anything about that. But the officers stepped inside. They presented printed emails, transaction records, investment transfers. Vanessa's silence confirmed everything. Within days, the financial scandal exploded across the media. Headlines accused her of manipulating confidential information. Investors began distancing themselves from Daniel completely. Vanessa disappeared from public view almost overnight. The woman who once chased wealth had now become the center of a corporate investigation. Months passed. Carter Global stabilized under new leadership. Emma walked through the company headquarters again, but this time employees greeted her differently. Respect replaced curiosity. Confidence replaced uncertainty. She entered the executive office overlooking the skyline. The CEO nameplate now read, Emma Carter. She placed her bag on the desk and looked around the office. The same office Daniel once controlled, but now the company answered to her. Emma opened the window slightly. Fresh air filled the room. Success didn't erase the past, but it proved something important. Betrayal had not destroyed her. It had revealed her strength. Meanwhile, investigators visited Vanessa's penthouse. Two financial officers waited at the door. Vanessa opened it slowly. Can I help you? One officer displayed identification. We need to ask you questions regarding insider information connected to Carter Global. Vanessa's confidence faltered. She attempted to remain calm. I don't know anything about that. But the officers stepped inside. They presented printed emails, transaction records, investment transfers. Vanessa's silence confirmed everything. Within days, the financial scandal exploded across the media. Headlines accused her of manipulating confidential information. Investors began distancing themselves from Daniel completely. Vanessa disappeared from public view almost overnight. The woman who once chased wealth had now become the center of a corporate investigation. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, power, and justice, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Stories like this remind us that betrayal may break trust, but strength can rebuild everything. Leave a like, drop a comment telling us where you watch from, and stay connected for the next powerful story.